It's quite blurry for me, but I don't know if that's because of my internet. Oh,
Uh,
it's got better now.
okay, do you all see
Yeah.
the presentation? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so the five archetypes of fatigue. So if you all got pen and paper, I'd like you to create a table in your notebook, a bit looking like this. So we got four columns. One is goes archetype, one is thoughts, one is emotions, and one is behavior. And leave five spaces underneath because we're gonna go through five archetypes. So we're gonna go through each five of them. What I invite you to do with this table is I've listed thoughts, emotion, and behavior for each archetype. So what we're trying to do here is for each of the archetype, I'd like you to write down any of the suggested thoughts, emotional behavior that I've wrote down. Maybe you don't have to. If none of them resonate, leave it blank. Because at the end, what we will do, we will count we will count which archetype has the most the highest score in your own writing, and then we will unpack what comes out for you out of this exercise. Does it all make sense?
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay. Wait, if it doesn't too much, it will make sense as we go along. So, yeah, as I said, I can't see you all right now. So if you want to communicate with me, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask me. So, first archetype is the achiever. So here, this is like a behavioral. Let's say like an archetype is a cluster of beliefs, behaviors, emotions, and thoughts, right? That's what defines, at least in my view, in my world, is an archetype. So the achiever, the first one, the first one we're talking about in terms of chronic fatigue archetype. Um, why is important to consider achieving, or especially hyperachieving, as as a dysfunctional archetype, is because they all stems from thoughts that tell you, and write down if that resonates with you, if I slow down, I'll fall behind, or I should be able to handle this. Rest is activity for the lazy or the unproductive. And or once I get through this, then I'll rest. So if any of this statement feels true for you, feel how your body reacts as you read. If you identify yourself in any of this, just write it down. It doesn't have to be. Maybe no, none of this resonate. But if that's just feels like it's part of your behavior, just note it down. The emotions that this archetype brings. So this is when we always feel that sense of urgency, of pressure. Feels that almost like our value as humans is determined from the amount of output that we put into the world, right? Therefore, we feel guilt for taking time off, for resting, for not looking after, a caring, or, a person that we are caring for, or um, taking responsibilities for others. We feel irritable when we get interrupted, and or when someone demands our attention and we are into a task. We feel really frustrated, and most importantly, emotionally, we feel that we are in a wired but tired state, where we feel like our nervous system is strongly activated, but we struggle to rest, and also we feel exhausted. So it's that sense of almost like feeling the clash of like wanting to sleep, but nervous system just being so frazzled that you can't fall asleep. This is such a common pattern that I've seen a lot of patients I took from and clients for chronic fatigue, is that the nervous system is so dried up, almost metaphorically speaking, that it just gets so overheated. What he wants is just rest and recharge, but almost like all this heat that's being built up, stopping it from resting and recharging. And this is all pattern of the hyperachiever pattern, because almost the belief that drives that is that if I don't do X, I'm not worthy. I'm not a good human. So take note of that, because behavioral patterns that we see in the achiever as pushing through symptoms. That's a classic one. We feel that our body signals us to rest, to stop, to just be and recharge, but we're pushing through. We're pushing through because these beliefs that are driving us and these emotions that are driving us. Skipping meals or not having structures, just pushing through, having narrow tunnel vision on one single of couple of tasks, and skipping everything that it nourishes us, or maybe watching something, or being on your phone or your computer, or doing activities whilst you're eating, whilst you is the time that your body asks for you to stop and nourish yourself. um, Overbooking, there's another classic behavioral patterns of the achiever, is booking yourself with so many activities, because there's a driving behavior, there's a driving belief that says, if I'm not doing A, I'm not worthy to be I'm not worthy of love, I'm not worthy of connection, I'm not worthy of just being me. And therefore we fit in activity that keep giving us that sense of self. And another classic one is staying up late to catch up with everything you haven't been able to do through the day, maybe because your symptoms, because your fatigue, because of whatever other reasons. But again, we are losing the priority for resting in order to substitute it with activity. That's what the hyperachiever does. Sacrifices resting, sacrifices self-care time in order to fulfill this need for being accepted, being validated, being loved through the activity that he does and she does. And the emotions that are present, we see as pressure, urgency, guilt, irritability, exhausting. Any questions so far? Everything feels clear?
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so if you are all good with noting down, we're gonna go into our second archetype, which is the perfectionist. Perfectionist and hyperachiever, they share very similar traits. The difference is the perfectionist focuses on not much on outcome but on detail. So for the perfectionist, it's not much about how many activities, but how precise and perfect can you make it. So the negative thought pattern that we see in the perfectionist is almost an avoidance at any cost of imperfection, avoidance of any cost of judgment or criticism. So for the perfectionist, nothing is good enough. Like there is, although I do believe that some form of perfectionism traits can be healthy, same of like achieving, like there's a healthy achiever archetype, absolutely. But for the perfectionist, here we're talking about the extreme side. So where there's always the sense of tension and restlessness because nothing feels complete. Nothing feels good enough to be complete. And therefore, the behavioral pattern is just ruminating and going over and over and over again over things. The negative thought patterns that an archetype, a full-blown hyper-perfectionist archetype, is that if it's not perfect, it doesn't count. Almost like not giving anything validity unless fits as very, very specific criteria that sometimes, more often than not, is unattainable. It's an inability to give us the possibility to rest until everything is perfectly put into boxes, metaphorically speaking. The emotions that often the perfectionist archetype experiences is this constant sense of self-criticism, almost like having like a tiny judge inside your mind that keep telling you like you're not worth it until you have squeezed yourself to the limit to make something perfect, whether it is being a perfect worker, a perfect mother, a perfect carer, a perfect wife or husband, because there's no such thing as perfect, really. We all live through a world of like beauty and imperfection, so trying to perfection to the very limit, something that will always have a degree of incongruence with what do we perceive as perfect. It's again triggering for chronic stress, for chronic activation on your fight to flight, and brings very heavy, dense emotions such as shame, such as anxiety, such as rumination, the inability of letting go. That's another characteristic of perfection, is the inability to say like this is enough. Anything else I just let go of, detach myself of. The perfection archetype cannot accept that. There's a rigidity and a sense of judgment towards others, because for our sense of perfection, then we see through this lens, we start seeing other people and how they behave, and then we become hypercritical and judgmental towards other work, and that creates more distance, creates more barrier. We struggle to open and truly connect and love fully another human because of this sense of perfectionism. There's always this sense of like, yeah, trying to change something, trying to change someone else. And also we're gonna go at the end, like at the end of these exercises, we will talk about the antidotes to these archetypes negative features. So yeah, this is the perfectionist. It's a very classic one. Perfectionism and chronic fatigue very often are in the same boat. I think this is the archetype that very often I tend to see the most. So if that's any of this resonated with you, note it down. If you have any question, unmute and ask. And otherwise, we'll jump on our third archetype, which is the helper. This is, again, it's positive to be of service of other, to be supportive of our community, of our family, of our partners, of our co-workers. But then the helper becomes an enemy, start working against us when we start taking other people's responsibilities over our shoulders. Why this happens is because, again, the belief that drives the helper is that if I don't sacrifice myself for others, I will never be loved. Or it's very selfish to put myself first. Again, I hear this over and over again. A lot of my clients, this is a pattern of like, especially mothers that I've seen, been dealing for years with chronic fatigue, is the sense of like this deep sense of guilt about setting time to rest and recharge, because the pattern is like, I am a valuable human only if I give all of myself to the service of something or someone, which in one side is noble, but on the other side is depleting, is draining. To make a metaphor, you cannot pour out of an empty cup. And the helper negative traits makes your cup relentlessly empty. So negative thoughts that we do see here is that your needs become second nature. They become second importance. They always become subordinate of other people's needs, whether it is your work, whether it is your family, whether it is your partner, whether it is any sort of circumstance or relationship that you gave that importance. Your needs become subordinate to that. Then there is the sense of almost not giving other people or the people that we care for a recognition of their own innate and inner strength. Therefore, we always think like, oh, my partner or my son, my daughter, they're not able to do this task by themselves. I always need to be here to help them. I always need to be here to support them. Almost like taking away from them their own responsibilities. We always feel like we have, and we do it with goodwill. Very often we feel that we're doing it with a goodwill to support, to nourish, but over a long period of time, this damages both parties because you're taking way too much of their responsibility on your shoulder, and they're not given the chance to learn from their own challenges, because their own responsibilities and their own challenges are also their own unique opportunity for growth. Emotions that we do see as well through the helper is mostly guilt. The guilt of like, if you take time for yourself, if you take time to rest, to recharge, if you take time to just be and nourish and look after your own needs, you're not allowing yourself to. There's a deep sense of blockage and a deep sense of almost self-hatred for doing that to the extreme. There is a sense of anxiety and also resentment because your body is asking you for help, is asking you to rest and stop and look inside and see what needs are not addressed. And you deeply know it, know when you should stop, know when you should look inside, but then the programming that's been installed, they drive you to do someone else's job, and then this resentment start building up. And you start feeling very often inside your belly, inside your solar plexus, inside your gut, you start feeling this tension, this resentment, because you've been neglecting yourself for a long time. That's what helping too much does. And behaviors that we see as a lot of that is, I would say neglection, and just being everyone rescuer, but then avoiding your own needs, whether it is food, whether it is rest, whether it is socialization, whether it is fun, whether it is anything to do with your own healing journey. So this is an archetype, again, comes out very often, and I do especially see in family mothers and carers where there's been an issue in setting healthy boundaries. So is everything clear and you've noted down some of these patterns and features? We can jump on our archetype number 4, which is the anxious. So the anxious is an archetype who lives in the past and lives in the future. It struggles to live in the present. The anxious is driven by a belief. This is the initial example that we made, is driven by a belief that the world isn't a safe place, that they, or better, they don't have the resources to face life threats, life's challenges, life's difficulties. The thoughts that often happen in the anxious archetype's mind is, I can't switch off because there's something important I need to take care of, or there is a threat, or there is a danger, or there is people need to be attended to, or there is always something that needs to be figured out. There's always something, some new enigma that needs to be figured out, a new solution that needs to be calculated. There's the inability to feel that you are safe, that you can just let go and be. Because again, very often there's this sense of like this external pressure will arrive. At the very core, the belief goes like, if these dangers arrive, I will never have the resources to face it, and therefore I'll disappear, I'll collapse, I'll annihilate. And therefore, you are driven through these thoughts that, more obviously, they drive emotions such as worry, dread, unease, hypervigilance, restlessness, insomnia, very classic symptoms of anxious behavior. So it's insomnia, palpitations. There's this sense of tension around jaw, around the chest, around the belly, your shoulders, the classic anxious shoulders. They go and they touch the ears. The body feels tight. The body feels tense because the body is creating almost a shield against the environment. There's a difficulty to truly connect and truly drop into situations and relationship because the mind is way too busy worrying about potential dangers and threats or in FOMO that may happen. And classic behavior patterns are distraction, because the sense of anxiety, it can be very overwhelming. So the anxious mind always try to find distraction, like scrolling, like cheap dopamine, like sugary foods, or entertainment of any kind, just activities that give us a quick hit and then leave us even more depleted. As I said, insomnia, inability to sleep, the sense of rumination of the past, and almost finding validation for our anxious thought. So finding almost proof in ourselves that we are right at being anxious. Over planning, just calculating all the possible negative outcomes, and always trying to find a solution for those. And again, with that comes also addictive patterns of like caffeine, sugar, and sometimes alcohol to numb the sense of anxiety down, and drugs also can be part of this. So yeah, the behavioral patterns of the anxious just to reflect the sense of deep tension and unease that stems from the deprived sense of safety and resourcefulness that originated somewhere alongside the line of your life. Yeah, so if you want to take notes, if you ever want any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll jump into our final archetype, which is the controller. The controller is an archetype that, again, it's very similar to the anxious, with the difference is that the controller is very active. The controller believes that if they don't manage any aspects of their life, they won't be able to be validated. They won't be able to make it. Their sense of self and safety is somewhat compromised, and the over controller says, if I don't micromanage any area, like all the potential aspects of my life, I won't be okay. Obviously, again, having dominion, having power, having control over what can be controlled in your life, it's extremely healthy, and it's actually fundamental for any health condition, especially chronic health condition recovery. Taking responsibilities for your own dominion, it's of utmost importance. But the issue with the hyper controller is that the controller tries to control aspects and behavior and situations that are out of their dominion. A little bit like the helper of taking other people's responsibilities on their shoulder. Again, it's another boundary issue where the controller tries try to manipulate almost the life outside of their own dominion. And this builds a lot of mistrust. Controller people often have been hurt. They've been hurt in the past, they've been hurt by loved ones, they've been feeling abandoned and betrayed. Therefore, they feel like the world is not a place that can be trusted. And hyper controlling kills our relationships because no one wants to feel that they're being controlled by others. And very often, these behaviors may come out very unconsciously. They come out very in an unaware way. Therefore, that is reflected. These thoughts are reflected into your body, into your emotion as constant frustration and irritability. Because obviously, if you try to control something that is outside your dominion, it will most of the time not go in the way that you want them to be. And that builds anger, that builds frustration. Anger and frustration generally are healthy emotions when someone crosses our boundary. And then we use this emotion to recreate our boundary. But if we don't have a very clear boundary of where we begin and something else's starts, then we're always going to be dealing with this sense of irritability, frustration, tension, and rigidity. There's a lot of anxiety that builds up in the controller's mind because there's so much that needs to be taken care of that is not your responsibility to do. And what I said before as well, the controller burns his connection, burns his ground around her. Therefore, loneliness is a classic manifestation in anyone who's struggling with the archetype of the controller. This inability to maintain relationship because people just walk away from these behaviors of micromanaging literally every person and every aspect of your and other people's life. This again, mistrust. There's a mistrust in delegating or even asking for help or even connecting deeply with someone. There's always a sense of suspicion and a skepticism around true connection, about true love, about any healthy aspect of a relationship. Very often, if that's rooted in past betrayal and abandonment. And controllers just suffer a really large amount of stress on a day-to-day basis, and the nervous system goes all over the place, causing a lot of adrenaline, cortisol, immune dysregulation, which down the line can further deplete and wreak havoc into a system. So write down any of this thoughts, emotion, behavior that if you feel that belongs to you. And right, well, before let's go back to let's return to the behavioral antidotes. Okay, the two archetypes that you realized are at the top of your list. The two ones, there may be a lot of overlapping. A lot of these archetypes, they like to be coming together. They are all friends with each other, in a way. But I like you to really focus on the two ones that stand out the most. Because for this next stage, we're going to be looking at behavioral antidotes or gainers. So, here, I listed, this is not a complete list, but I set 4 gainers, so 4 behavioral antidotes to each of these archetypes. So have just a brief read through this. These are all basically activities that are in line, are healthy expression of your archetype. The helper, bringing it back into balance. Making an example, we look at the helper. What does the helper need the most is setting boundaries. Saying like, this is me, this is my time, this is where I need to rest and recharge. This is you. I'll think about you later. I need to put myself in priority. We're looking at the perfectionist. It's about accepting imperfection. It's accepting the fact that nothing in life can be perfected to to the extreme. There's always going to be the beauty of life is the dance with perfection and imperfection. So it's about acceptance and letting go. We look inside the achiever. The achiever is about finding more scheduled, structured, balanced time between resting and doing. And for example, again, there is like stopping caffeine for the afternoon, for instance. For an anxious person, we're looking at. I wrote some like acronyms here, but ANT is automatic negative thought spotting. So this is a good exercise I can share with you later. And NSDR stands for non-sleep deep rest, which is another way of calling yoga nidra. So, well, maybe for an anxious person, what is really needed to become things in line is to shift perspective. Actually, instead of worrying about something in the future, let's shift perspective to something you can be very grateful for the now. And doing over and over and over and over and over again until your nervous system says like goes in autopilot and it's like, oh, I'm noticing much more gratitude and less worrying. And maybe for the controller is rebuilding trust, which is a very challenging process, but it can all be done step by step. How you do it, you may start maybe delegating something or finding a trusted friend and entrust them with something that maybe you feel like is out of your control. And finding a review as well, like a weekly review, deciding to condensate everything that you want to control in your life. You've constantly micromanaging. Just choose one day where you pour all your energies into creating a deep schedule for your life, and then feel into the assurance that you don't need to always control and micromanage things because you're already doing it on a regular basis. So these are just examples. So I'll lift this slide up. What I'd like you to do, look at the top 2 archetypes that you wrote on your journal. And I'd like you to choose one action within this 4 suggested one. Maybe there's an extra one. Maybe something already came out to you and it's like, there's actually something that I love to implement in my life, right? That is not within the suggested. But otherwise, just to use this 20 suggestion as your reference. I'd like you to look at your top 2 archetypes and choose one gainer, one of these behavioral antidotes for each of the 2 top archetypes that are relative to you. Maybe you want to choose more than one, which is great, but just choose one that feels like doable. And relevant, especially. Something that you feel like, this is not something that is part of my reality yet, but I really would love to implement and feels it's doable. Feels like, I could do this. Maybe it's not the easiest route, but it's still within your capacity. So you'll let me know when you're all done with this selection. And then we'll open up a little space for sharing. Okay, how are you all doing?
Need a little bit more time.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, I'm all good.
Fantastic. How are you all doing? All the rest of us.
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. I'm ready.